every now and again, a really cool or historic team that dropped wrestling or a team that should have wrestling gets brought up in the wrestling media. This concept always got me thinking. Plus, I love looking back at old brackets and seeing universities you never heard of or you didn't even think had wrestling at some point having multiple All-Americans or national champions is stunning to look back on. A combination of this, along with some edits Fanco has made on his Twitter recently, made me pull trigger on this video. Sadly, wrestling is not like a football team or a basketball team where almost every school feels like they need to have it. Wrestling is honestly one of the cheaper sports, but it seems like whenever there's budget cuts to be made, they are the first to go, whether it's ethically or unethically. No one likes seeing programs go, especially when they have a long-lasting tradition, and those seem to stay extraordinarily harder. This video is here to honor some of those traditions and to take a look back at some of the best wrestling programs that are no more. There has been an unrealistic number of programs cut in the last 50 years, which is sad to say. I cannot name every program that has been cut, but I try my best to make a list of the top 20 best schools that do not compete in Division I wrestling anymore. What do I define as the best? Well, to be honest, this isn't a ranking really at all. I'm going to go in alphabetical order, and the teams I picked either had a national champion, multiple All-Americans, finished in the top 10 or pretty close, or they're just a huge university that I think should probably have wrestling. However, if I missed your old alma mater or missed a team that you think deserved to be on this list, please feel free to leave it in the comments section below. Overall, this was an awesome walk down memory lane, and if you enjoyed this video, we would love for you to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more wrestling history deep dives. We have made videos looking at Penn State versus Iowa during the Kale era, and we looked at all the 5 champ teams in wrestling history. However, this video is to look at the best teams to drop their programs, so let's quit beating around the bush and dive in. To start us off, we'll talk about a pretty recent team to leave wrestling in Boise State with kind of a devastating story. Before we get too far into the dramatics though, let's honor the blue and orange. Sick colors, by the way, like look at those singlets, dang. But at times, Boise State was honestly a powerhouse and really helped out the strength of the Pac-12. Boise State had 30 plus All-Americans from 1975 to 2016. They had 2 national champs in school history. The first champ to mention was Ben Cheriton, winning in 2006 as the 5 seed at 157 pounds. Their other national champ would be Kirk White in 1999, being the 2 seed at NCAA, so having 2 upset national champions. In the modern era, they of course had their 2 national finalists who both actually lost to Jordan Oliver in the finals, with Andrew Hofstrasser in 2011, and then in 2013, Jason Chamberlain, and they were both All-Americans in 2011 as well, giving Boise State back-to-back multiple All-American years. Adam Hall, the NC State assistant coach, was an All-American in 2010 and 2011. They had another set of 3 All-Americans in 2009 too, along with Kirk Smith being a 2-time All-American in 2008 and then 2010 to help their teams really grow and gathering multiple All-Americans during this time period. It is sad to see Boise State get cut just a few years later in 2017, with their last All-American being Gio Martinez in 2016, placing 8th in a strong 149 weight class. The cancellation of the program was due to the athletic director trying to fit into the Mountain West Conference a little better, and to add baseball, which was proven to be way more expensive than wrestling. With just after 14 games and the start of COVID, the baseball team was no more, taking the wrestling team down with it. Brigham Young is our next university we are going to take a look at, or as most people call it, BYU. BYU never had a national champion, but they were a powerful force in the mid to late 70s. They had around 20 All-Americans from 1967 to 1999. More impressively, they left their mark by becoming a trophy team in 1973, finishing in the top 4, and then finishing in the top 10 once again, placing 6 a few years later in 1978. One of their best wrestlers was Ben Owie, who placed 4th in 1973, and then was a runner-up in 1974 at 190 pounds. Their last All-American was Aaron Holker in 1999. He was a Utah legend, and after the program was dropped in 2001, luckily he would transfer to Iowa State and actually become a national champion during the 2002 NCAA tournament, where Iowa State was placed silver in the team race. Apparently BYU was dropped due to other Mountain West schools dropping the sport, making it hard to reschedule, which sounds kind of weak in my opinion, considering other teams survived, but who really knows. Cal State Fullerton is another team that simply fell just to a lack of funding. At the end of the 2011 season, the athletic department just had a choice to make to limit cost, and it's really sad to say, but wrestling was the first thing to go, which is another Pac-12 team that could boost the growth of the conference. In 2008, they did not gather any All-Americans, but they had 4 national qualifiers and entered the national rankings for the first time in school history. They had a 2-time All-American in David Jones in 1990 and 1991, along with 12 All-Americans in their time as a team, and their last All-American was in 2007, who was Wade Sauer. I really wish they were still around because I could see a rivalry between Cal State Bakersfield and Fullerton being a fun Pac-12 premium match for California fans or something like that. The next team is a really fun one that people always bring up, and that is the Death Valley team in the ACC, the Clemson Tigers. Now imagine a duel on Clemson's football field. That would be insane, like Clemson versus NC State or something, but sadly Clemson is no more. Similar to other teams that we already have mentioned or that we will mention, it basically came down to a lack of funding. Several other schools in their area were dropping programs, so it really hurt with scheduling, and apparently there was a few investigations going on that did not help their support either. Clemson only had 8 All-Americans, but they were looking to be a powerhouse before their doors closed in 1995. In 1994, they finished in 7th place in the NCAA tournament, along with gathering their second national champion in school history, Sammy Henson, at 118 pounds. Surprisingly enough, a lot of their starters were from Southern schools, which goes to show, especially in today's era, if you can keep the talent in the South and continue to develop them, a school like Texas or Clemson could really take over. I also really think it is safe to say that Clemson is one of the top schools people really want to see brought back. Eastern Illinois was an interesting case, ending their wrestling team in 2007, apparently due to poor grades and performance by the team, while of course trying to make budget cuts. Now I say this team is interesting because most of their success was back when wrestlers could compete in Division II nationals, and then they could compete in the Division I national tournament if they won their own Division II national tournament. During their time in D1, they had 14 All-American honors and several multiple-time All-Americans. Some of their more famous highlights were during the 1979 national tournament, where they had Dave Clem make the finals, placing second, and 2 other All-American finishes. This was the most in school history, with 3 All-Americans in 1 year. They also had Gino Savignago, becoming a 3-time All-American, placing third twice at the tournament. And then their last year to reach a Division I All-American, they placed 2 on the stand in 1997, and they had a 10-year dry spell before being cut, unfortunately, in 2007. Bringing it back to recent years, this team was super relevant just a few years ago in the Fresno State Bulldogs, who were just starting to get things going again when the administration cut their program for the second time. Yes, that's right, the second time in school history. In 2006, the program was cut due to financial issues, and this was only 3 years after their multiple-time national champ Stephen Abbas left the scene. Then in 2017, the program was brought back to life, but after some problems and COVID hurting their university financially, Fresno would be cut once again. And to be fair, it was right when Fresno State was about to go down the right path again. They were starting to have a lot of success. They had an All-American in 2019, and during their final season got another All-American in Kyle Parco, along with gathering some team wins in 2020. Fresno even was a top 10 finisher in years like 1993, placing 8th as a team. Unfortunately, they are once again back in the conversation of what could have been. Now we were speaking about a college mostly associated for housing Larry Bird, but would you believe they actually had some pretty awesome wrestlers back in the day? For true wrestling historians, you will know the uber famous Bruce Bumgarner was a 3-time All-American for Indiana State. In 1982, he also captured a title along with a top 10 finish for Indiana State as a school, which honestly was a huge accomplishment in the history of that program. They had a ton of multiple-time NCAA All-Americans like Ted Parkers, Robert Ferrero, and John Effner. And then obviously Bruce Bumgarner, of course. In 1986, the same year John Effner got his second All-American honor, the university cut several athletic programs, and apparently there was a huge student backlash, but little could be done to stop the end of these sports. And just as quickly as a small Indiana school got success, they were cut. Kentucky is an unfortunate case of Title IX, which I agree is fair for all athletes, but it drastically hurt the SEC in wrestling. I would also like to note, once again, I have no problem with Title IX. For most of these SEC schools, that was the problem. However, during this time period, Title IX was not totally worked out yet. Once they sort of figured out some financial things to help all programs, it was a lot better. But just at the time period, it did hurt a lot of programs. But like I said, I'm really glad and I think it's fair for all athletes. But back to the wrestling in the video, I guess. In 1981, the conference was hit by a rock of financial problems, it seemed like, and most wrestling programs ended their run, including Auburn, who placed 9th in the country that same year. Kentucky at least lasted until 1983, but in their time, they had 2 top 10 finishes in 1977 and 1980, along with several All-Americans, of course. They were on the rise like the rest of their conference, but it was too little too late. Rick Dalagatti was their last All-American and probably their best, becoming a 3-time All-American, finishing 3rd twice and 4th once. Continuing with the SEC, let's take a look at Louisiana State, or more well known as LSU. Similar to Kentucky, a rocky start, but slowly was starting to break in the NCAA landscape as a top team. Also, oddly similar, they also had a legend place their last season of existence, which was a little longer in 1985. Their 3-time All-American that seemingly ended his career in 1985 was, of course, the legend Kevin Jackson, who would actually become a 4-time All-American, getting his last honor at Iowa State. Overall, LSU was similar to most SEC schools, got better and better as the years went on, and finished in the top 10 in 1984 and 83, but unfortunately they would get dropped just too soon right when they were starting to have success. The next team will be a quick entry to mention because I think it falls in just a cool school that I think should have wrestling, and that is Notre Dame. Now, there's a whole bunch of theories on why Notre Dame wrestling got shut down, and to be honest, in all of my findings, I could have made a full video on just all the theories on why Notre Dame got shut down, but please just note, most of the theories involve murder, deception, million-dollar lies, and manipulation. Or all those are just far gone theories and it came down to budget issues. Notre Dame Wrestling closed their wrestling room doors in 1992. They only had 5 All-Americans, but they did have a 2-timer in Bob Golick and 2 All-Americans in 1989, being Pat Boyd and Jerry Durso. Comment if you want a Notre Dame video, by the way. I would love to make a video like that. Moving past the halfway point, we see Old Dominion, who cut wrestling after 63 years due to COVID financial problems in the spring of 2020. They had a total of 23 All-Americans and a national champ in their lifespan, which is impressive and super sad to see let go. They even had super recent success with Larry Early being their most recent All-American. They had a multiple-time All-American in Makeda in 2015 and 2016, and a multiple All-American year in that 2015 span. Hopefully we can see a rebirth of this team like Fresno, but who knows. Next is Oregon Wrestling, back in the Pac-12, ladies and gentlemen. Just a note, Stalemate did make a way more in-depth on this program getting cut, and it was a really well done video, so go check it out if you haven't already. Oregon's last year was in 2008, just 2 years after getting a national champion in 2006. It is sad to see them drop basically due to budget issues and some other theories related to bringing back cheerleading and baseball. As we know, baseball was way more expensive compared to wrestling, so there must be something out west in the water that people just want baseball all the time. They were also trying to build a new arena, and all these things really hurt their wrestling team, and just years after getting a national champ, Shane Webster, they were dropped along with all their 20+ All-Americans. Now, we've been talking about a lot of larger schools that could make wrestling fun again, but a college that used to be a mini powerhouse was Portland State. Portland State was another Division II team that could bounce in the D1 from time to time. However, on top of their 20+ All-Americans, they finished in the top 10 3 separate occasions, which is incredible for a small school like that to do. They not only finished in the top 10 in Division I those 3 separate occasions, they also had a national champ in 1966 in Rick Sanders at 115 pounds. They also had Dan Russell, who beat Pat Smith of Oklahoma State before in a match, which, wow, that's insane. Unfortunately though, Portland State was cut in 2009 after a lack of success and a need to make budget cuts. They had a long Division II legacy, and back in the day, those guys were competing heavily in Division I. However, after being in Division II for a while and then going in Division I scene full time, they could never rebound, finishing last in the Pac-12 several years in a row, which is never good, and eventually they closed their wrestling room doors along with a long wrestling tradition in Portland State. To stick with some small schools that were competitive in the Division I level, we look at Slippery Rock in Western Pennsylvania. In 1975 was one of their best Division I seasons, gathering a 6th place All-American along with 6 national qualifiers. However, in 1974 they would finish within the top 10, which is truly incredible for a small school like that, but sadly, like so many other small programs in the modern era, they fell off in the wrestling landscape, and in 2006 they would be cut from the wrestling scene. Sticking with one more competitive small school before heading back to some big boys, we see Southern Illinois Carbondale. Now, some of you are probably thinking like, Tanner, what are you doing? This school is in the top 20 best cut schools of all time. Well, yes, just stick with me, I promise it's worth it, and let's not offend any SIUCarbondale alumni now. In all seriousness though, wrestling fans will be amazed to find out that Carbondale is another school on the list with BYU to finish in the top 4, placing 4th to bring home a team trophy, along with having 2 national champs, one in 1964 in Don Miller at 167 pounds, and then Terry Finn taking it home at 115 pounds. In 1962, they also finished in the top 10, with Miller getting All-American honor once again. It's crazy to look back at a team like Carbondale that had multiple All-Americans and a team trophy, and to consider them just no more. I could see them possibly having a rivalry with SIU Edwardsville in the modern era, but sadly that just won't be the case. Now, coming down the stretch, we have our last 5 schools, and we have another ACC favorite, this one being Syracuse Wrestling. A lot of teams on this list were good for 1 or 2 years, with multiple All-Americans spread out, but Syracuse has a wowing wrestling history. They had 20 plus All-Americans and 5 national champions, along with Jim Nace, a 2-time national champ, and Gene Mills, another 2-timer. Mills is also a legend in the sport, which is sad when legends don't have an alma mater to watch compete on the mat. Syracuse Wrestling closed their doors in 2001, and it was a very similar case to the Stanford situation from a few years ago, where they needed to raise $2 million to stay alive, but they never quite got there in 3 years, and their team slowly shut down, and we haven't seen an elite squad since 2001. Like I said, super sad because Syracuse could very easily be one of the best teams in the nation right now, considering they finished in the top 10 6 times in their tenure, but they unfortunately are no more. Temple is sort of a smaller school but competes Division I in all major sports, and the same was true for wrestling. This is another school that could really thrive in the EIWA, which would be a perfect landscape for a team like this, and that's proven considering they competed in that conference. They're also another team that had a top 10 finish in 1969, where they took home 10th place along with a national champ at 123 pounds. UCLA, who I'm not going to mention on this list, also placed 8th place this year as well, so yeah, bring the Pac-12 back to its power. However, Temple is more than a one-champ program, as they also had a heavyweight star, Bill Hyman, who was a 2-time All-American, placing 4th in '84 and then winning it all in 1985. Temple never made it into the modern era, but they have been building a club team like many of the teams I have mentioned, so hopefully they can once again get financial backing by their university and enter the NCAA once again. The final SEC school to mention is Tennessee, who also finished in the top 10 during their lifespan, which once again shows the SEC could have stole all the Southern talent and from elsewhere to get multiple All-Americans. Tennessee was the last school to stay alive during the late 80s, if you don't count Missouri, who's still wrestling today. Tennessee would fall in 1986, 1 year after LSU also closed their doors. Also, side note, they won't get a segment, but Auburn got a top 10 finish in 1981, which can you imagine if there was an Iron Bowl between Auburn and Alabama in wrestling? But besides the point, back to Tennessee. They would secure a top finish in 1985 thanks to their single national champ Christopher Edmond, which is sadly another team with a national champ that does not have wrestling anymore. Fortunately, they would get one more All-American in Tim Cochran in 1986 before they would essentially wipe out the SEC, leaving little hope for a rebirth. The last team to mention in the Pac-12 is the Huskies out west in Washington, which I think is famous for the one and only Larry Owens, the 3-time finalist and 1-time champ who obviously beat the one and only Dan Gable. Washington is another trophy team, and they had a squad in 1972 with Larry Owens placing 2nd, and then the Huskies would gather another national champ in Bill Murdoch, and with that combination they would gather a team trophy for the good old Pac-12. Washington wrestling was cut all the way back in the start of the 80s for seemingly cutthroat reasons. Despite the success at the time and hosting nationals 7 years before the cut, they quickly pulled the plug, just saying the sport did not make enough revenue. And just as quickly as they found success was as quickly as their program was gone. Let's wrap this video up by talking about another fun one in the missing Ivy League school that could fit right in the wrestling mold in Yale University. It doesn't take an expert to know that there is only 6 of the 8 Ivy League schools that compete in the EIWA for wrestling. But how sick would it be if they all competed? Well, like most old-time sports, Harvard and Yale both had wrestling, but only Harvard lasted the test of time. However, this segment is to honor the wrestlers of Yale, so let's do that. Yale wrestling was started in, get ready for this, in 1903 to 1904, and unfortunately closed their doors in 1991, which is just about a decade shy of 100 years. Left behind in the Yale wrestling room was a list of 11 All-American honors, along with 2 national champs, one being Annie Fitch in 1959. That is a long time ago. Their other champ was during the mid-70s in Jim Bennett, weighing in 1975 and becoming a 2-time All-American, placing 4th at a weight up in 1976. Yale basically ended trying to budget around Title IX, but ultimately they ended their Ivy League and wrestling runs. And with all that, we have a walk down a super memory lane. We were in the 50s at one point. Seeing some of the best teams to close their wrestling doors for good, but honestly, there was always hope. Media outlets are seeing the value in wrestling sponsorship, ticket sales, and streaming deals, so with the right school like a Clemson, Syracuse, or Oregon, we could see a rise in some of these drop programs. Plus, it seems like every year we gain a new Division I school, which is exciting for the sport to bring it back to the glory days. We also have to realize that teams like Fresno State have made comebacks before, along with the amazing Stanford story, so you can always save a program or bring it back. Also, teams like Temple and Clemson have rising club teams, which is a start to get back on the NCAA scene. However, at the end of the day, if you are watching this far into the video, thank you very much, because I get it, this was an unreal long video compared to most of my content. So if you enjoyed, I would really appreciate for you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I also missed a ton of teams, which is a reason I made it 20, because we could be here all day. It's really hard to cut teams, and some teams put in over others, but I truly tried my best here. And leave a comment down below if I missed your alma mater or your favorite team that no longer has wrestling, or if you just want to talk about some of the teams I mentioned. I would love to hear what you have to say. Now, with all that said, thank you all very much for watching this really fun video. I had a ton of fun making it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.